everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm pleased to be joined by Jonathan from Newcastle United Fans TV. I'm looking forward to this one, and I'll tell you why. So last week when we played Aston Villa, a fortnight ago as it was now, I knew what the guest was going to say. I knew he was going to come on and say the season's going fantastic. Emery is genius. The game before that, we played Burnley. Again, I knew what the guest was going to say. Season's a bit crap. Newcastle on Saturday, I have no idea what you're going to say in regards to your season, your manager, your hopes for next season. So I'm really looking forward to this to get sort of a mindset of a Newcastle United fan this season. So Jonathan, could you kick us off with your thoughts on your season so far, please?
It feels like a very long season and we've still got a quarter of the season left. That's how it feels as a Newcastle fan right now. On the face of it, 2 quarterfinals, FA Cup quarterfinal, League Cup quarterfinal, Champions League, top half of the Premier League table as we speak currently. You would, from the outset, you think it's not a bad season for Newcastle. Actively, it's probably a good season for Newcastle in terms of what we've had in recent times, but it's just been so disappointing for so many different reasons. The injury crisis has been so tough to watch. We've got a decent squad on paper. I think people forget that we're obviously missing probably 3 or 4 really key players at this moment in time, but the season itself has just been so frustrating, so irritating. But there's still a bit of optimism. I think there's still a bit of optimism more for what can Newcastle do next season. Can Newcastle get into Europe this season? So on the face of it, look, should Newcastle, with the team they've got, the squad they've got, be a little bit higher in the league? Yes, in an ideal world. But where we are right now is pretty much where we deserve to be, if I'm honest.
Yeah, so what's the disappointing elements and aspects of the season then? What would you say is like making it disappointing for you?
Injuries have absolutely killed our season. Like we're in the middle of December, and we had 5 kids, Richie and Paul Dummett on the bench, and they don't really play. Like they don't. Paul Dummett's barely played all season. Matt Ritchie's played a couple of games, but he hasn't really started any games, and it's absolutely killed us. The Sandro Tonali ban hasn't helped. He was our big summer signing from AC Milan. We were all excited. We've seen him play against AC Milan in the Champions League at the San Siro, and we think, well, we've got a really good player here. He repeated his performance against Paris Saint-Germain at St James's Park where we won 4-1, and you're thinking, well, we've got a nucleus of a really, really good squad. If we can keep our best 11 fit for the vast majority of the season, Newcastle will be in and around the Champions League places, considering there's a chance that 5th could be a Champions League spot as well. And we were kind of getting back to where we are after a bit of a dodgy start with the defeats to Liverpool, Manchester City and Brighton after a fantastic win against Villa on the first day of the season. But it's just been one injury after another, one disaster after another, if you like, and it's just got to the stage now where I wouldn't say Newcastle fans are counting the games down, but I think a defeat on Saturday or maybe not a win on Saturday would be where fans will go. Can we just get this season over and done with, and then we'll think about next season, get a couple of players and get rid of a couple of players and then take it from there.
What's your hopes then for the remainder of the season? Because is sort of Europa League enough for Newcastle? You know, given you had Champions League football this season, but as a neutral, it could be argued that you probably overachieved last season and you jumped ahead a couple of years. You probably had a bit of a plan how to get into Champions League, but you just did it like that. And it's like, whoa, now has expectations risen or what's happened? So what is Europa League qualification, whether that be 6 and 7, is that successful for you, or is it disappointing given what you achieved last season?
I think if you swap the seasons round, and this season was last season, and the season from last season was this season, you think, perfect, the progression's going from step to step. But because last season, Tottenham just fell off the face of the earth, Liverpool had a poor season, Chelsea were nowhere to be seen, Newcastle thought, well, we'll have a go. We'll try and get into the top 4 if you like, and we deserve to. You know, and I don't think that was taken granted by anybody. I think we deserved to finish in the top 4 last season. However, this season, I think if Newcastle were to finish 7th, for example, I think that would still be considered as a good season, and I think it'd actually be considered as a very good season when you put everything into it all together. I think, like I said, we've touched about injuries already, but that has been massive for Newcastle. We're essentially playing 3 games a week from September to December because Newcastle was still in the League Cup as well. We got knocked out by Chelsea a couple of days before Christmas. So we were playing constantly 3 games a week up till Boxing Day against Nottingham Forest, and it was just taking too much of a toll on the team. Since the turn of the new year, it's pretty much been a game a week. We've had the odd week where we played 2 games, obviously a 3-game week, but nothing like it was at the start of the season. And the performances have been a bit better, but just the results haven't backed it up in certain games. But 7th would be an outstanding finish, and there's certainly a chance that Newcastle could do that.
Would being in the Europa League help you with that 3 games a week thing? Because obviously we've been in European football for 3 years now. And I think because, especially in the Conference League, I think we could have fielded our second 11 and probably got out of the group stages. But there has been occasions in the Europa League we've been able to rotate and rest 1 or 2 key players. Whereas when you're playing in the Champions League, you can't really do that. You basically had to field your strongest 11 Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. And I guess there's probably a correlation there between players being used and amount of injury. There's probably something in that. So do you think almost Europa League next season would allow Howe to rotate more and hopefully avoid injuries and therefore build on that?
Yeah, I think rotation is obviously very, very key. And I think that is important. But I think for Newcastle and this still quite early years under this new ownership, of course, they need to be in Europe every season to kind of be seen and to keep your star players. Now, the Conference League, people can say whatever they want about the Conference League, but if I asked a West Ham fan, what do you make of the Conference League? You say it was one of the best days of your life when you won last season against Fiorentina. You look at Aston Villa right now, they're in the quarterfinals and they're the bookies' favourites right now. They'll say they're having a great time. They just beat Ajax 4-0 at home. So that's the kind of feelings I think Newcastle will probably want if they can get into there. Now, 7th or 8th could potentially get there, because if Chelsea and Coventry don't win the FA Cup, which no disrespect to Coventry, no disrespect to Chelsea, you would expect a Manchester City, Manchester United final. So I think that both Newcastle and West Ham, I think if they didn't finish in the top 8, I think there'll be questions asked when you look at the teams that are kind of fighting for those positions. But you've got, I think for clubs like Newcastle and West Ham, you've got to be in Europe every season to keep attracting new players to sign. Do you think Lucas Paqueta would have been a West Ham player if he weren't in Europe? That's Bruno Guimarães for Newcastle, Alexander Isak for Newcastle. Would those players be here for the long term if you're not in Europe? I'd probably say not. They may give it 1 season if they see where the club's going, but you need to keep the star players happy, and that by being in European competition. Well, that's how you keep them.
Speaking about long term, then let's talk about Eddie Howe, because I don't know what your answer is going to be here, because it does feel a lot like the opposite a little bit, maybe from West Ham and Newcastle, where the fans are perhaps unhappy with Moyes, but the media are going, "What's the problem?" And I think perhaps Newcastle fans might be happy with Howe, but the media are going, "Hey, there's a problem over there," and it's like, "What problem? You forgot to tell us there's an issue at our club." What's your opinions on Eddie Howe now? And also, I suppose for next season, long term, is he the man for you? Because it could be 2 different answers here.
Yeah, look, I think every Newcastle fan, like every West Ham fan, will have an opinion on David Moyes. And every Newcastle fan has an opinion on Eddie Howe. I think my personal opinion is, with the vast majority of Newcastle United fans, Eddie Howe deserves more time. He deserves to have a real, a real crack at this. And the fan base is certainly on side with him. I take into account everything that's happened since he's been here. He's kept Newcastle United up. He's got Newcastle to the first cup final in 20 odd years. He's got us into the Champions League in the first time in 20 odd years. And comparatively speaking, when you look at Man City and Chelsea and even other clubs like Aston Villa, who have spent money, Eddie Howe hasn't spent anywhere near enough when you compare it to those sort of teams in recent years. And if financial fair play is a little bit different, they may be able to spend more, but that's a different conversation altogether. However, if you look at Eddie Howe right now, these last 10 games, he'll consider these 10 games really, really important. And I think he'll almost say, if Newcastle don't get into Europe, it's a failure this season. If they do get into Europe, it is a success this season. So I think that there is an internal pressure, but you're quite right. I think it's the outside noise where people are putting pressure on Eddie Howe. Jose Mourinho's out of work. He's got a little soft spot for Newcastle with the relationship he had with Sir Bobby Robson. That link's never going to go away. Now, right now, is Jose Mourinho what we need right now at Newcastle? Some would argue yes, because we need to get a trophy on the board. Some would argue no, because he's not the type of character. Eddie Howe, for me personally, is what we need right now. We need someone that can build this team, who knows what the players are like. My only slight issue with Eddie Howe, I just think he needs to create a plan B, because we haven't really seen a plan B. It's plan A, and if it doesn't work, we'll try and make plan A even better. And that's my only issue. I think we need to, start trying to stop conceding too many goals, because we've been conceding far too many goals in the second half of the season, and he can't put his finger on it. I think we've only had 1 or 2 clean sheets since January. You're not going to win many games of football if you can't keep your ball at the back of the net.
Deserving times, all very well, I get it. But what about confidence in Eddie Howe succeeding long term at Newcastle? Do you have that in you?
Yeah, I do. I think look, he's got a lot of credit in the bank right now, and we've obviously touched upon that. But he's still a manager that's still, what's the best way of putting it? Not that he's new to the game. He's been at Bournemouth, but I think in terms of maybe a club with more expectation, there's more. There's more. What's the word? You've got to look at Newcastle and compare it to Bournemouth and go, well, Bournemouth just want to stay up every season. That's a good season for them. And there's not really too much pressure, because if they go back down, they're kind of a championship club anyway. For Newcastle, there's that expectation to try and finish as high as possible, especially with the new ownership now. They want to be number one. Are Newcastle going to be number one with Eddie Howe? That's the next question with 3-5 years down the line. But look, he seems to be improving year in, year out. Now, it's this season where we haven't really seen that so far. However, there's still been performances this season, standout performances, where Eddie Howe has made differences tactically. It's particularly the first part of the season where you go, we can see what you've done there, Eddie. And especially so we can go, we can see why you bought a Sandro Tonali, a Harvey Barnes. We just haven't seen them enough, and that's the problem. But I think next season's a big season for Eddie Howe, because I think if they're in the first, say, we don't finish in the European places, and in the first 6 to 8 games, we're nowhere near the top half, or nowhere near, the top 6, top 7, then there's a serious question. But right now, I've got a lot of faith in Eddie Howe that he can get Newcastle back to where they should be.
Good man. Right, last question about your club before we talk about my one. For any West Ham fan watching this that hasn't seen Newcastle much recently, which players would you say are in form and to keep an eye out for?
Well, there's the 2 outstanding players for Newcastle. Bruno Guimarães, of course, he is our linchpin. I personally think, and I'm sure West Ham fans don't watch Newcastle week in, week out, but I think he's our only true world class player. If I'm honest, he makes everything tick for Newcastle. We try to give him the ball as much as possible to allow him to do his magic. He's so instrumental to our attacks. He can break up the play. The only thing that's stopping Bruno Guimarães probably playing for a Real Madrid or something like that is he hasn't got any pace. But that's not important for what Newcastle United need right now. He's that good in my opinion. Anthony Gordon's the other player for me. He's really surprised me when we signed him from Everton last season. We think it's a lot of money for a player that wasn't really getting a kick at Everton, but he seemed a bit of an unhappy scouser really. And then he's just come to Newcastle, and he's just been allowed to develop under Eddie Howe. That's one of Eddie Howe's biggest strengths before with player development. And Anthony Gordon's had an outstanding season. He's always a threat from the left. He's contributed with goals, contributed with assists. He's eager to learn. He's eager to improve. He's been a real thorn in a lot of sides this season. I think Anthony Gordon may not be player of the season for Newcastle because Bruno Guimarães is in our team, but he's certainly in the contention because he's been that good for Newcastle. It's been brilliant to see. But they're the 2 outstanding players. We're obviously missing a few players as well, like Joe Linton, who's key for us in our midfield. Nick Pope in goal, of course, is the obvious standout as well. And Callum Wilson, who just loves scoring a goal against West Ham, which I know West Ham fans are not wanting to say too loudly. But we're still missing 2 or 3 players.
Yeah, I thought Gordon looked good against Brazil as well on Saturday night. I thought he looked good. He looked confident. He looked like a player that was in that England team for a long period of time. The confidence to take his players on shoot. But then again, on Tuesday against Belgium, I thought Jai Bowen was excellent for England as well. So we've got 2 players called up, 2 wingers called up that did themselves no harm for the Euros squad. Right, to my team then. What do you make of West Ham this season?
I'm going to use a Cockney phrase. I don't know if it's the right phrase, and tell me if I'm wrong. It's a bit of Jekyll and Hyde, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I'm not Cockney either. I mean, the accent gives it away a little bit. You're closer to London than I am. But yes, continue.
Yeah.
Should we just say inconsistent and leave it?
Yeah. We'll put it at that. Yeah, inconsistent. You know what it is with West Ham? You look at that team; it's a very strong team, and it's got some very, very good players. I think some of the signings have been very, very clever. I thought James Ward-Prowse coming in was very, very clever. I know missing Declan Rice was huge. I feel that obviously with West Ham, at the minute, it's a case of we've got the quality, but we're just not showing it on a consistent basis to kind of want to get behind David Moyes a little bit. I think the problem is, and you'll see this with so many different outlets and so many different opposition fans who don't watch West Ham week in, week out, go and hold on a second. What realistically can David Moyes do more results-wise? In terms of performances, week in, week out, yes, he might be winning games. It might not be the best-looking games, but he is delivering. And that's the real sticky point between fans who watch West Ham week in, week out and other people that don't, because they'll look and go, well, hold on, West Ham are 7th in the league. You know, they're still in the Europa League quarterfinals. Yes, they're playing Bayer Leverkusen, but you never know. West Ham have got a good enough squad to cause a bit of damage. They won the Conference League last year. They've been in Europe consistently since David Moyes really took control at West Ham. For me, I always say be careful what you wish for, but if someone can come in at West Ham and do exactly the same, but play better football, that's ideal. That's ideal. But at this moment in time, how many better managers are out there to actually do that? I know there's some people that have mentioned Graham Potter. Yes, he's nice on the eye in terms of what he can do, but he's just been bruised a little bit from Chelsea. I think that would be, I don't think necessarily a gamble, but I don't think he would deliver what David Moyes has done in this season, for example. So it is a difficult one. I can see both sides of the argument, but there's still some outstanding players. You've mentioned Jarrod Bowen, really, really good player. Nearly came to Newcastle before he went to West Ham. If might actually put his money in his pocket. But I like the defence. I like Zuma. Big fan of Zuma. I feel that there is, like, Paqueta's the main man, of course, as well. He seems to be the one that makes it all tick for West Ham. Hopefully he's carrying a bit of a knock from Brazil. That would be lovely, but I don't think that will be the case. But it should be a really, really good game. Really looking forward to it. I think it's a reason why it's been chosen by the television companies. I think there's guaranteed to be goals because both teams do like to attack, do like to score a lot of goals, but concede a lot of goals as well. But yeah, it should be a really entertaining game at St James's this weekend.
Yeah, I was going to ask you then, how do you see this game going? I can usually detect a little bit of optimism or something when talking to somebody throughout, but either you're keeping your cards close to your chest, or you're just quite difficult to read, or you're thinking it's going to be quite a tight affair. But how do you see Saturday going?
I think it'd be a very, very tight affair, but I think it's a big, big game, particularly from a Newcastle point of view, because we're 4 points behind. I think we're currently 4 points behind West Ham, but we have a game in hand.
Correct.
It's big, because if we can win and be a point behind West Ham, and you've got Thursday, Sunday, we're not playing 2 games a week, we'll feel that it's a real opportunity to get into that 7th or 8th place. And you look at the teams around it. Wolves, I think we're both comfortably better than Wolves right now. Brighton are a bit hit and miss and got some tough games. I think they've still got to play Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal. So they've still got 3 very, very difficult games. Chelsea, again, a bit hot and cold. They beat us, but I don't think they're brilliant, if I'm honest. No. They have got a couple of good players, so it's also keep an eye out on them. So for Newcastle, I think it's a massive game. I think if we can win, it'll certainly put us back in the right direction. If we lose, I think West Ham will feel that they can keep that gap between us of obviously the 7 points if they can come out on top. But prediction, I think Newcastle will win. I think it'll be very, very close. I don't think it'll be, a 4-5-0, anything like that. I don't think any team's playing that well. I could be wrong, but I think Newcastle will just edge it by 2-1.
Yeah, I'm not going to sort of think it's a wild prediction. I said a draw. The other guy from Hammer's Chat said that you've been 3-1, so he's more confident of you winning. We're missing Edson Alvarez for Saturday, who's pivotal to the way that we play, just the linchpin, really. It feels like you take him out and it starts to crumble around him. We've played a few games this season without Edson Alvarez, and we're terrible in the middle of the park. So I think Bruno might have a little bit of fun on Saturday. And I've still got nightmares. I know this one's at your place, but last season at our place, I've still got nightmares from that performance. That was the only time last season I genuinely thought we'd get relegated, is after you just absolutely ripped us apart at the London Stadium. And I think you could have had 10 that night if you kept on going. But anyway, Jonathan, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Best of luck for the rest of the season. I genuinely mean that. I've always got go on with Newcastle fans online. Not every fan base is kind. Not every fan base is quite respectful and humoured and whatever, but I've always found the Newcastle one. Gonzo not so much. Gonzo doesn't have the best relationship with Newcastle fans. I, however, do. So best of luck for the rest of the season, and any team that can go in there and disrupt the Sky Sports 6, as I call them, is a friend of mine. But Jonathan, thank you very much for joining me. If you guys would like to hear and see more from Jonathan, you can check out Newcastle Fan TV. I'll put a link in the description below, and their latest video will be on your screen in approximately 5 seconds' time. However, if you've enjoyed this preview, please do drop a like, comment by clicking on thumbs up. Subscribe to Hammer Chat, myself and Jonathan. Catch you in a bit.